Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I am Scott Warr, and today we're with Brad Kearns. If you go back into the archives, you will see that we've had Brad Kearns on multiple times, but for some reason he disappeared from our site, line of sight, and he's back. He's the co-author of Born to Walk and a longtime advocate of rethinking training principles. He has his own podcast, which we'll list in the show notes below. This is actually an episode building on an episode we did, I don't know, Don, maybe about a month or so ago with Mark Sisson about the book that they co-wrote called Born to Walk. Brad explores the misunderstood world of aerobic conditioning. We discuss what elite athletes like Eliud Kipchoge are doing right, and what most this is where you need to pay attention, what most recreational runners are missing by focusing on slow, low-intensity efforts. Brad challenges the hype around the Zone 2 training and shares some insights on polarizing training resilience and the surprising value of walking.
And welcome to the podcast, Brad. I tell you, Scott, Brad has been a mentor of ours for a long time, and the lineage goes back quite a ways. We have Julie Fingar, who dispensed some of Brad's wisdom to us along the way, and another runner, Bob Powers, also a great friend of ours and of Brad's, who shared the information about training and running and efficiency long before he started writing these books. And a few of the things that stick with me, Brad, get ready for this because you are not prepped for this. A couple Bradisms have been passed along. And the first one is after a strong...
we should make a game of this. Let's say here are the Bradisms, and let's see if it actually came from Brad. So,
right.
So Brad, you're going to tell us whether this came from you or whether you have no idea where it came from.
Well, that's going to be fun, Scott. And I'm going to watch the expression on his face as I say these. After a great race, you passed on a piece of wisdom, and we held on to it as a Bradism, a BK-ism. And it was, after a great race, sit down, relax, and don't do anything for 2 weeks except eat pie. That's what you should do. Go out and enjoy some pie, but don't worry about training. Is that true, Brad?
I'm not sure if that was your pie sponsor jumping in and revamping the quote. But I was specifically referring to running completing a marathon or an ultra. And, the research is showing that the inflammatory markers and the digestive system and the immune system is torched for at least 2 weeks afterward. And then the rate of upper respiratory infections after, especially first-time marathoners, there was a study done in the LA Marathon many years ago, and it was like a third of them got a cold. And so it was like, it's almost become like a rite of passage in the culture. Like, yeah, you're going to, run your first marathon and then you're going to be laid up in bed. And so, the recovery period, even though you feel great because you're buzzed with endorphins and the cortisol's coursing through your bloodstream. And, you hear a lot of people going out for an easy 5-miler 2 days after they finish their first marathon. And it's really a time where the body needs to, shut off and do virtually no exercise except for walking, which is the first little plug for the book here, is walking as a form of recovery and a form of training.
So you're telling me the best thing that you can do after running your first marathon is get on a flying petri dish and fly across country back to your home and just use that broken immune system to capture all the diseases that are on that floating petri dish.
Well, I mean, when we were all worried about traveling during the pandemic and the masks and all that, the research shows that like the airplane cabin is some of the cleanest air you'll ever breathe in your life because it's 99% recirculated every 3 minutes, and they take half of it from outside and then the other half is through circulating the cabin air with filtration. And so it's a really, really clean place. However, you're in close quarters with a bunch of people, so your point is taken that even though the air is clean, as soon as that dude sneezes on you, then you're fragile for that long period of time after an extreme endurance event, for sure.
So for the first Bradism, I'm going to give that a mark of semi-accurate. I mean, it was there. I don't know if you do Rotten Tomatoes on the. I don't know how you judge this, Scott. I don't know what we're going to use, but I'm going to say there's a little bit of truth to
For
that
sure.
one.
Chill for a couple weeks. Yeah.
Then the next one is, so I set it up with, Brad used to train with Lance Armstrong. They used to go out and ride bikes. This is how it was told to me, and I believe it's true.
Hey, Don, before you get into the ism, tell us a little bit about Brad's pedigree. Why is he even on this podcast? You mentioned, he trained with Lance Armstrong. What? Are you kidding me?
Well, no. Brad's a phenomenal athlete, and he's a humble man. He didn't come up and say, "Now wait a minute, guys, read my accolades," but he has plenty of them. Between 1986 and 95, he won 31 worldwide professional triathlete events. I mean, the real deal. He was on a magazine in his Speedo shorts with his number painted on his chest and doing this thing that they do.
Top 3 in the world.
Top 3 in the world. He also now you wrote all these things down, Scott, and I'm just now from memory a mastered world class high jumper from what ages 55 to 59, that category, jumping over things that we don't usually do at that age, but he goes out and sets a world record with it. Is that true, Brad? Am I on point there? Did I miss anything?
I'm very proudly reporting that I got the silver medal this year, 2024, in the Masters National Championships in the high jump, and my age division's 55 to 59. So the bigger point is that I've really transitioned my athletic goals from endurance, where I was deeply immersed in that scene when I was a professional many years ago. And so now I'm a sprinter and a high jumper, and it's been really fun for me to completely transition my approach to training, even my mentality. I've had to work through, embracing the idea of being a sprinter and a power athlete instead of that endurance mentality that I kind of carry into my training and sometimes can harm me, because the sprinter needs a lot of rest and downtime and then explosive, powerful efforts during the workout. Whereas the endurance athlete, it's all about, volume at a low intensity. You don't have to worry about these recovery cycles that are, more extreme than endurance athletes practice. So it's been a fun new challenge that's occupied me in recent years. And my days as an extreme endurance athlete are long gone, but it was a really fun journey. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about, all the insights and things that came through, including what I learned from Lance Armstrong. But yeah, today I'm a high jumper and a sprinter.
So Brad, where does a one lap around the track, 400 meters, is that endurance? Is it sprinting? But you ran that in 1:04.
1:02. Thank you very much. And
what's a couple seconds?
By the time the listeners listening to this, I'm gonna break 60, man. I'm turning 60, and so if you want to log into my bank account and my passwords to everything, it's sub 60 when I'm 60. That's my goal, and it is such a daunting challenge. I don't like to reference chronological aging too often, but I also have to respect that things change as you get into the older age groups, and you have to recalibrate your notions of, what performance and recovery mean, and what your body can handle, and respect, your limitations. So that's my thing, is I want to be fast even as I age. And that's a great way to, promote longevity as well. But yeah, it's tough. And there's a lot of injuries involved because you're doing something that's powerful and explosive. And look, I'm hanging in there and I'm doing well in the older age groups because of attrition. Really, there's not a ton of people jumping over a bar and bending their body like a pretzel at age 55 to 59. But it's tough for me because I do have that long background as an endurance athlete, not a sprinter. And then I didn't set a world record in the high jump. And by the way, the guy who has the world record in the high jump in my division, he can jump like 6'6". And he happens to be the number 3 high jumper in world history, Carlo Thronhardt from Germany, who jumped 7'10" and a half back in his day when he was an Olympian. So the competition is pretty stiff in the older age groups when you have these legends coming back and dabbling when they're in their 50s. It's kind of like, looking in the Ironman age group divisions, and you see, Dave Scott at age 45 taking 5th place overall in the race. So, pretty crazy.
I think during this discussion, I would like to revisit things change as you get older, and how can we, maximize what we have left or still enjoy what we have as things do change, and we recognize that they do. The watch works a little bit different, and the calendar in some cases works a little bit different than it did when we were in our 20s and 30s. So
the watch works differently, Don. That is damn right. And what's so funny is when, you're running a hard interval, and in my brain, I feel like I'm running a 4:46 mile for time. And then I look at the watch and it says 6:00. And I'm like, no, that was a 4:46. I was up on my toes. I was striding. I was explosive. What's wrong with this stupid watch?
It's the watch.
Yeah.
So I'm not done with the accolades here for Brad. Speed golf. Speed golf is I didn't even know it was a sport, but apparently Brad does, because he measured it and has, I don't know if he created the record, self-created, or something he went after. But speed golf, how do you become a world-class athlete and mark your time in the world's records for speed golf?
So that's where I have the Guinness World Record, and my record is for the fastest single hole of golf ever played. And it has to be a 500-yard length hole. It can't be like, hey, I got a hole in one and I played a hole in 4 seconds. So you have this, it's a par 5 for golfers aware of the length of the hole is pretty long. And so you're running as fast as you can and trying to hit the ball accurately to finish in the hole. And I had this miracle performance. I think it's one of the greatest athletic highlights of my life, even though it was this goofy Guinness World Record attempt. But I hit 4 perfect shots. So I scored a birdie 4 on a par 5 in Los Angeles in 2018. And I played the par 5 in 1 minute and 38 seconds. So I got my little Guinness World Record certificate. And so, I was running close to 1 minute pace for 400 meters. Runners can reference that. But I just happened to hit these shots that were, I only had one club, a 3-wood. So I hit 2 perfect 3-wood shots. I chipped with a 3-wood, and I sunk a putt with a 3-wood for the birdie. And I raised my hands in triumph. And that was my moment for the Guinness World Record books. Now, it's an actual competitive sport where they have a golf tournament where you keep score, and they time you on the course, and they add your strokes and your minutes together to get a speed golf score. So my best speed golf score in a tournament is 125. So you ask a speed golfer, hey, what'd you shoot? Oh, I shot a 125 today. It's not a great score by golfing, but what that represented was I shot a 78 in 47 minutes on an 18-hole championship course, 6,000-yard course. So I was running kind of like a tempo. You're running about 5.5 miles on a typical golf course. So I'm running as hard as I can, really, at anaerobic threshold, and then trying to, score and make pars on the holes. And that's a really good score for me as a golfer. I'm a pretty good golfer. I'm a 70 shooter, but also running fast. And mind you, I'm only carrying 5 clubs in a tiny little bag. So I'm hitting a lot of in-between shots where the speed golfers have to learn these new techniques to, work with the clubs that you have. So it's a really beautiful sport because it has a Zen-like aspect to it, because you can't get into that frustrating, overly analytical mindset that a lot of golfers suffer from when they're spending 5 hours out there and they have all their clubs and their caddies telling them how much wind there is, or, oh, these greens are really fast today because they watered them a lot last week. All you're doing is like rushing through this tempo run and reacting to what's in front of you, whether it's a chip shot or you're in the sand or you're facing a long putt or a long drive. And it's really beautiful to just be in that kind of zone mindset automatically, because you don't have time nor the energy to get frustrated and upset with yourself because you didn't hit a perfect shot.
So I have 2 questions, Brad. So I imagine you don't start and tee off at 1 o'clock because there's plenty of golfers ahead of you. How do you manage this? 4 coming through, you can't wait for that foursome in front of you just trying to figure things out.
Very astute,
how does that go?
A very astute question. Here's the thing about speed golf it is not a social sport because you're obligated to play by yourself. Because if both of us go out there, I'm going to whack you in the head
Yeah.
with a shot because you get 10 seconds ahead of me and I'm behind you. And so you have to play in a staggered fashion, like a time trial on the bike you see in the Tour de France, where, I tee off at 8 o'clock, and then 8:05 is the next player, and then 8:10, and then 8:15. And so we have the course to ourselves because we're running so fast. And oh, by the way, you have to be the first person off in the morning. Otherwise, you're going to catch every single group out there. I mean, I told you I played the entire course in 47 minutes, right? So for the average group, that's around the third or fourth hole on your typical Sunday outing at a crowded golf course where they're playing in 4 to 5 hours. So when I practice, I'm either the first guy to show up first thing in the morning, or I wait until right before dark. So in the summer, I love going out to the golf course at like 7:30 p.m. and there's no one out there anymore, and I'll play 12 holes before it gets dark. So it's a great workout. It's got that Zen component, but it's not at all social. But the best part is you can go play a speed golf tournament and literally finish the tournament and go to breakfast and then go to the office and have a full workday because, again, you're only playing for less than an hour and the whole thing's over.
So is there any, like, an ideal course? Is like, oh, if you're going to try to set the record, you want to go play this course. It's a downhill course. It's a fast course. Do you have that course marked out? Do all speed golfers know the Indianapolis, the Kentucky Derby of golf courses?
That's so funny because when I broke the Guinness World Record, obviously I chose a desired hole that was nice and flat and didn't have any obstacles. And this was at Woodley Golf Course in Los Angeles, 503 yards. So I got the minimum 500 and not much more. And then I noticed on the internet that this guy who's now one of the top players in the world, he's a Ryder Cup player and a European Tour and PGA Tour highly ranked player, Thomas Detry from Belgium, he broke my record. And I'm like, wait, no one should be breaking that record because I hit 4 perfect shots and I'm a pretty fast runner, faster than a pro golfer, right? I learned that he did it on a course in Spain that had a 65-foot drop from tee to green. And so I actually protested to Guinness. I said, wait, this course is downhill. You can't have a record on a downhill. I hereby protest, and I launched my formal protest. And they're very official at Guinness. Everything takes a long time. It took me 11 weeks to get my record ratified. And, I had to have 2 timers, and the second timer had to submit more verification that they were skilled with the stopwatch and all this nonsense. And so my protest was accepted that here and after, you cannot try the single hole record on a hole that drops more than 65 feet. But because they allowed the other record, the record stands. And so I said, okay, fools, how about I, apply to break the record at this golf hole in Malaga, Spain? And they said, okay, you can have a crack at it. So someday I have to go back to Spain and try it on this beautiful downhill hole that gave the other player an advantage.
Now, Brad, when the next world's record book comes out, do you quickly get that edition and thumb through to find the speed golfing to see if your name's still on it? Are you at jeopardy of losing the position?
Well, now it's so funny because, the book has always been a bestseller and a great Christmas gift, but now there's so many records that they've more, transitioned to like an internet-based experience where they have videos and you can see all the fun stuff. And that's how I originally learned about this record, Don, because, the speed golf tournaments are a big thing. You play an 18-hole championship course and keep your score. But I didn't know about this little offshoot until I saw this guy in Great Britain set the original record that I broke. And, you called me a humble guy, but I don't know if my wife's listening, she's going to be like, who are they talking about? Because, I like to talk trash and all this. So I saw this record on YouTube. It was a viral video because the guy's family dogpiled him on the green when he broke the record. And I'm like, 152, I can bust that out tonight before dark because, I'm a pretty good player and I'm fast. And so I went out to the course and I had a really good effort my first time trying to do this fastest hole. And I looked at my stopwatch and it was like 2:12 and I couldn't believe it. And so I went home and I found the guy's email and I said, dude, how did you do this? This is an amazing performance. Are you like a world-class sprinter or something? And he wrote me back really nice. He said, Brad, I played that hole around 1,000 times, and I knew exactly where to hit each shot in order to have the best chance to go as fast as I could. And so I watched this video over and over, and then I went out and I practiced with obsession for 4 months. And my competitive advantage, I felt, was that he was carrying a little bag and switching clubs as he played the hole. So he got out his chipping club, and then he put it back and got out a putter. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. I'm going to learn to putt with a 3-wood and learn to chip with a 3-wood. And that's what I did for 4 months. I played golf, and I putted on the green with a 3-wood, and I came through under pressure on the big day. So it was a super fun little folly adventure that's, representing my current athletic obsessions are away from that long distance stuff where I had my time in the pack. And now I find new things to keep me adventurous and fit and focused, really.
So can you believe we're over 20 minutes into this podcast and we haven't even started the subject that we're talking about? But that's what happens on a trail run. You meet your pals at the trailhead, and you may have an idea of what you're going to talk about that day, and instead you learn about speed golf.
That's such a nice segue. You'll probably inject a mid-roll commercial right here for one of our trail running sponsors, like, and the bandanas to keep you cool, and you put an ice pack in there. And back to our show with Brad Kearns talking about speed golf or who knows what.
So are we ready for the next Bradism? I think we've got derailed a bit. Some days we learned this from learning that Brad trained with Lance and a number of other elite triathletes. And he said, when we go out, and tell us if this is true, Brad, when you go out on a ride, if somebody peels off because they're just not feeling it that day, it's okay to turn back. And no harassment, no judgment, no calling somebody weak because they can't do it. You gave permission to the group that anytime you're not feeling good, then take the day off. Any truth to that?
Absolutely. And that includes also just being a no-show. So like, hey, we're meeting at the trailhead at 8 a.m. and we're going to wait till 8:05 and then take off. And if you're not feeling it, I think, the social aspect of training is super important, and what makes it, an enriching experience and all that. But I was referencing, we were competing on the pro circuit and it was our livelihood. So you really had to look out for yourself first and foremost. And all elite athletes have to be selfish in that respect. So the camaraderie and the support during a workout, it has to align with your goals. And I think this is also important, like in a team setting. And my collegiate running career was an absolute disaster at UC Santa Barbara because I was trying to keep up as a 17-year-old freshman with 23-year-old fifth-year seniors that had beards and mustaches and were able to put in 80 to 100-mile weeks, where I was just struggling to make it through these workouts. And I just proceeded to dig myself a hole over and over. It happened 4 seasons in a row where I got, pneumonia and stress fracture and shin splints. And it was all due to trying to, adhere to the template workout that was more designed for a more seasoned runner and a more mature runner. So you have to have that individuality if you want to succeed. And you can figure out a way to still make it social. And that includes, slowing down to a pace that might be optimal for someone who's less fit than you, and you're having a slightly less stressful workout, and that's okay.
Now,
hey, Don, Brad just gave me permission to be a no-show this weekend, just so you know.
I've been waiting for you to show up for a couple of years, Scott. What are you talking about?
Oh, ow, did you feel that go right through the heart?
Here's my final Bradism, because we need to get to the book Born to Walk, because I really want to learn about that. And here's my final one. And I could do an entire episode. I couldn't dispense any information. I could learn and talk about this for an entire episode. And that is, and I give this one to you, Brad, train with intuition. Train with your intuition. Did you ever say that or speak to that? Because it was passed down to me that it was from you.
Every day, man. Never forget that one. And I think this is especially important to dust this off today because of the increased technology and biohacking and self-quantification. So now we can outsource our intuition and our feelings and our sensation of how we're adapting to training to technology, and it's not a good thing. I'm a big fan of heart rate variability. I'm sure you've had people discuss that on your show, and it's a good adapted technology to help give a window into the functioning of the autonomic nervous system. However, it's interesting to note that a lot of the data is flawed and misinterpreted by the user. And one of the things I learned from the true pioneer in heart rate variability, Joel Jamieson, he's a trainer of MMA fighters, and he's been doing this technology for like 30 years. He taught me that when you have a higher than normal HRV, most people perceive this to be a sign that they're good to go and they're super rested and they're getting fitter, their HRV score is higher. But what that can also mean is that your sympathetic system is so fried that you're parasympathetic dominant to the extent that you're kind of a blob because you've pushed yourself too hard, and now you're in deep, overtraining mode, whereby a lot of recovery is warranted, even though you have a higher than normal HRV score. And we already know what a lower than normal HRV score indicates sympathetic dominance. But in both examples, a lower score or a higher score, it could be indicative of overtraining. So what's the person to do who's evaluating all this data? You have to bring the intuitive component in at all times, because otherwise, the data is just, working with a fluid dynamic individual. And I think a lot of athletes make a mistake of trying to rigidly adhere to, a well-designed schedule, perhaps that they paid a professional to draw up. But there's too many variables, and you have to go with the flow all the time. And that includes halfway through a workout where you had a planned 20 miler, and maybe today the best thing to do is make it a 10 miler instead of a 20 miler, going back to the previous Bradism that you can turn around and head back before your training partners because you're not feeling it that day.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I would love, Don, let's do an episode on that, because I'm thinking there's a lot of people that are probably training to a plan, whether that's something they pulled off the internet or whether they paid a coach to come up with, or they have one of these smart watches that say, you're recovered now, go out and run, and maybe there's some flaw in the algorithm that they're using. So I would love to talk about that.
Well, Scott, I think where we're missing it, as you said, let's you and I do an episode. We don't have enough information for an episode.
Oh no!
We need to bring somebody like Brad on.
Don, let me remind you, we're hosts of a podcast. We are not we're not the experts. We're here to learn, baby.
I just want to clarify. I want to clarify that before we committed.
Yeah. Hey, Brad, talk to us about Born to Walk. You teamed up with your old friend and training partner and coach Mark Sisson to write this book. Why is it important for us to know that we were born to walk versus the 15-year-old or whatever book, Born to Run?
Right. I mean, it's a cheeky take on the very popular best-selling book by Christopher McDougall, Born to Run, who did a wonderful job, talking about the Tarahumara and the romanticism of these amazing ultra endurance feats by the great top runners in the world and the primitive peoples, and it really helped catalyze the running boom as well as the barefoot movement and all that great stuff. But when you sit back and reflect on the tremendous growth of the endurance scene in the last recent decades, there are some things that are flawed and misinterpreted and destructive to the average enthusiast who's just trying to live an adventurous life, get out of the confines of comfortable, convenient, and sedentary modern patterns, lace up some shoes and take off running down the trails. And we want to really emphasize the importance of doing these endeavors in the correct manner so that they support health rather than destroy your health. And we're talking about both mental and physical health here, because it's really easy for the endurance scene to attract a highly motivated, driven, goal-focused type A type of person who has a tendency to get influenced by the cultural values and go out and push themselves too hard and have the whole experience be a net increase in overall life stress levels to the extent that we can look at a recurring pattern of breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury. And a lot of it's going to be driven by marketing hype and commercial forces that are convincing us that, for example, the marathon is the ultimate running distance, and you can really call yourself a true runner if you can complete the 26.2 mile finish line. Now, how did marathon become such the ultimate distance? Well, the Olympics and Frank Shorter winning the gold medal is credited with kicking off the running boom. But if we go back a little further, I have a fun anecdote to share that I learned about in detail researching this book, that the modern day marathon is, of course, inspired by the legendary Greek runner named Phidippides, who, as legend has it, ran from the city of Marathon to Athens, Greece, to report the news of victory in battle to the leaders of society in Athens. And so he said, Nike, Nike, Nini Kayan. That means rejoice, we won the battle, we conquer. And then supposedly Phidippides collapsed and dropped dead after his heroic feat of reporting the victory. Here's the thing. It never happened. It's a complete fabrication. It was penned in an 1879 poem where the poet took liberties with actual Greek history and made up this story of a messenger running from Marathon to Athens, distance being around 26 miles. And that's what lit up the marathon in the modern Olympic Games that first occurred in 1896. They said, hey, let's do a 26-mile race like Robert Browning wrote in his 1879 poem. So since it never happened, what is the rationalization that this is the ultimate human running achievement of going 26 miles? And what really happened, Phidippides was a legendary hemerodromos, that's a messenger in the army. So he was a foot soldier, and his job was to relay important messages. So he was an extremely elite, high-performing endurance runner, and he actually ran 153 miles in 36 hours from Athens to Sparta to request the help of the Spartans for an important battle. And then when he got to Sparta, he found out they were on vacation. And so he had to quickly turn around and run back to Athens and say, hey, we have to delay going to war because the Spartans are on vacation. So he turned around and ran 153 back. So he ran 306 miles in 72 hours. One of the greatest endurance feats in the history of mankind, because the results of these battles shaped Western civilization. This is all inspired by Dean Karnazes' great book, where he went back and retraced the steps of Phidippides. They have an organized race where they run the 153-mile course, extremely hilly, over rough terrain, which is why the foot soldiers were able to go faster than horses. They went over the mountain and down the single track and all that, and blew the horses away. So if we really want to honor Phidippides, the modern day marathon should be 153 miles rather than 26. And the point of this anecdote here is that we're luring these sedentary office working people who drive a lot of cars and ride subways and sit in offices and sit on couches to try to complete a 26-mile run in the name of great athletic achievement, but the basis is a fabrication. Now, what if the modern day marathon was 13.1 miles? I think we'd all be better off, because it's still an extremely amazing endurance achievement for a modern citizen to perform, but it's not so difficult and stressful to train for the average person who has other things going on in life and can't put in the 120-mile weeks like Frank Shorter. And in chapter 1 in the book, we also talk about, okay, who are the legends that we look up to in the endurance running scene? Frank Shorter was 5'10", 134. Josiah Thugwane from South Africa, who won the gold in the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, was 5'2" and weighed 99 pounds. Sifan Hassan, one of the most, probably the most versatile and most amazing runner of all times, arguably, being world class in the 800 all the way up to winning Olympic gold in the marathon after 2 bronzes in the 5 and the 10,000 meters. She's 5'7", 108. So we're looking at these genetic freaks who have the incredible adaptation to run long distances with their physique and their training and their lifelong dedication to it. And we're trying to participate in the same event as them. It's kind of like trying to suggest that people jump into the sumo ring with Akebono, the great Yokozuna, the master of sumo wrestling, the first non-Japanese to make that level. And he was 6'8", 550 pounds. So he was genetically adapted for sumo wrestling, just like Frank Shorter is genetically adapted to run marathon. And the whole argument here is to rethink the rationale that maybe the best event for you is the Turkey Trot 5K, and you can train for that and be able to run 3 miles nonstop with good form without, blowing out your heart rate and your knees and getting all the injuries that we see in the running scene.
Now, you mentioned 13.1, that distance. We had the chance, and I'm only telling the story so I can say that Scott and I had a chance to interview and have on the podcast Tim Noakes, who is by no doubt a leading author and thought leader. And we asked them the question, what is the best distance to run for the body, for fitness? And we're expecting to hear, oh, of course, it's the 100-mile run. That's what we were thinking, right? But he dismissed that. He didn't even consider it. He said the very best distance for the body, most healthful, is probably the half marathon, 13.1. He said anything beyond that just puts a lot of stress that's not needed for the body. However, there's some benefit to maybe a 50K because you tap into some emotional side, some mental processing side. So there might be some benefit there, but certainly not for the physiology of the body. You can really break yourself down. So I wanted to say that so we could say we spoke to Tim Noakes, but also because I think it tied into your comment, and I think it's an important thought.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I don't want. I know you have a lot of ultra athletes listening to the show, and we don't want to turn anybody off with my enthusiasm of second guessing these things. So there is sort of a fork in the road, a distinction to when your endurance training is compromising your health and when it's supporting your health. And that comes to the intensity level and how stressful it is for your body to do this type of working out. So if you are at a comfortable heart rate and you're exercising and you're taking the summer to hike the Pacific Crest Trail or the John Muir Trail or the Appalachian Trail, you can't think of anything more healthy than being outdoors for hours every day and perhaps, hiking at a comfortable pace. Or if you're an ultra athlete and you're not super competitive and trying to qualify for the Mont Blanc finals or whatever, you can enjoy 3 or 4 or 5 hours in the canyon where you're, jogging down the road and hiking up the steep hills and having an outdoor walking / jogging, if you're really fit, experience. And I think the problem that we see is where the masses are being trained and programmed to push themselves to, suffer and struggle to get to the marathon finish line in 4 hours and 12 instead of 4 hours and 38 that they did at their last event. And that's when it gets too stressful and all kinds of trouble happens in the body. And one of them, of most important note, is that the extreme endurance training does not help you reduce excess body fat, period. And that might be the pull quote if Ryan's still awake. Oh, he is. He's watching and learning and enjoying. Because I think one of the main reasons that people are out there burning calories are in the name of staying trim and looking good and dropping that little spare tire or that excess that they're not happy about. And it's been proven strongly with research, this is not an opinion, that when you burn calories with endurance exercise, it doesn't really make a measurable contribution to dropping excess body fat. Wait, how come Sifan Hassan is so ripped and she has a six-pack when she's holding up her gold medal? Elite sports performance is a totally different category where those athletes are pushing themselves so hard. And of course, they're going to be lean and ripped, whatever the sport is. But for the average enthusiast that's running a 4.5 or a 5.5 hour marathon, what's happening with those calories burned during running is they are directly contributing to increased caloric intake and increased laziness and calorie burning in general everyday life.
As you know, I'm going to ask this question, but I've got to give credit to Scott because he did send over a couple questions to me because he knows that my research isn't always, on on the mark. And so his question was, well, then how does a runner shift their mindset to be okay with that zone one training, slower training, and not going out and hammering to their limit?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, first of all,
It's Scott's question.
yeah, I mean, I've coached athletes one-on-one for many years, and I'll ask them straight up, like, what are your goals here? What are you trying to do? If you're trying to escape from your shitty boss and your stressful workplace environment, or run away from something in the home rather than face relationship issues, hey, go out there and bust your butt and burn a bunch of calories and come back exhausted and flooded with endorphins temporarily, but then suppressing immune function, over the long term. But if anyone wants to state that they want to use their endurance pursuits to achieve performance goals or be a better person and become more disciplined, focused, happy, well-balanced, anything that has some sort of positive, then the argument is to do it correctly and do it in a way that the body responds. And that's where we have to sit down and say, look, the proper intensity to develop aerobically is a very comfortable pace where you're burning mostly fat, or you're burning fat at the highest rate. We call that fat max heart rate, or the MAF heart rate. And that's where optimal development of the aerobic system occurs. When you exceed that fat max heart rate and start to drift into more and more glucose burning and anaerobic type of stimulation, you regress in your aerobic conditioning. It's too tiring. The recovery takes longer, and you teach your body to burn sugar rather than fat. This is a simplified observation, but this is, the life's work of people like Dr. Phil Maffetone. And of course, Noakes has talked about this at length in his book. You want to be a good fat burner who can comfortably maintain a pace for minutes or hours, whatever your performance goals are. And when you exceed that aerobic heart rate during training, that is a recipe for fatigue, burnout, recurring overuse injuries, and a regression in performance, and keeping excess body fat on your body rather than becoming a good fat burner.
Brad, give us an example. I think you talk about Eliud Kipchoge and his training. Now, I'm not on Strava. Don's not on Strava, and so we don't follow. I don't know if Eliud Kipchoge is on Strava. So, but Strava is kind of a fun thing, but it can also be a very negative thing, like many social media platforms out there. How does Eliud Kipchoge, who's arguably the best marathon runner in modern day, how does he train, and what does he have right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said modern day because Phidippides probably was the best of the old days, running 306 miles in 72 hours. But we mentioned him a lot in the book, along with some other elite athletes, because if we want to take the example of how the best athletes in the world train, and inspired by that, figure out the best way to train for a recreational athlete, it is astonishing to learn that the top marathon and ultra marathon runners train by and large at a very comfortable pace that is at or below fat max heart rate. And Kipchoge published his training log on the internet for all the coaches and exercise physiologists to have a field day with many years ago. And there's all kinds of articles written about and analyzing and breaking down the ratio and the pacing and all that. He runs 82 to 84% of his weekly mileage at what he calls, quote, easy or 50% capacity. And translated to heart rate and so forth, he's pretty much in zone one, the long forgotten zone one, as we obsess and promote zone two as the ultimate training zone for endurance. He's mostly in zone one. He's like 9% in zone two, and then 7% going fast and slamming out these amazing 8 times 1,000 meters in 2:37 or whatever they're doing on the track at high altitude as the greatest of all time. But what he's mostly doing is conditioning that aerobic system with comfortably paced exercise to build this phenomenal aerobic base such that he can run a marathon in an hour and 59 minutes. But most of his training is in the 626 to 803 pace per mile range. And if you're listening and you know how fast that is, and you're thinking, yeah, he's running 626 pace. Well, his marathon pace is 434. So most of his training is 2 minutes to 3.5 minutes slower than his marathon race pace. We did the research around the globe. Do you know what the average marathon finishing time is among the 2 million marathon runners? It's 4:31, which is a 10:18 pace per mile. Now I'm getting to perhaps the punchline of the show here and the big plug for the book Born to Walk. So if you take the average marathon runner and apply the training model exhibited by the greatest marathon runner of all time, and run at below that capacity or well below that capacity, now you're drifting into the magical 13:57 per mile, let's say 14-minute mile. Do you know what that represents? You listeners listening carefully, that is where the human typically transitions from a walking gait to a jogging gait. So 14-minute per mile is a brisk walk. If you are chartered to train at around that pace or even slower, that means that a huge percentage of your training as a 4:30 marathoner, or even someone who's a 4-hour marathoner or a 3:30 marathoner, you're going to have a pie size that appears on the screen that is going to be brisk walking as a fundamental element of building the aerobic system properly and avoiding overtraining and exhaustion from pushing that edge too frequently with what seems like a comfortable maximum, zone 2 limiting jogging, workout where you feel fine, you're talking to your friends, but you're pushing it in a manner that exceeds what the greatest marathoner in the world does. And that's where we have to sit back and reflect, why am I pushing myself relatively harder than the people who are winning the Olympic golds?
Brad, we're talking about this zone 1 training and how we should stay in that for the majority of our training. How do we find out what that zone 1 is for each individual? I know that I get out, if I stand up from my chair right now and walk upstairs, I could be in zone 2 pretty quickly. Now, that may be a question of my fitness, but how do we know what zone 1 is? Zone 2 is, there's a lot of different calculations, but I think Phil Maffetone and some others have said, if you can talk and hold a conversation without, pausing and trying to catch your breath, that's zone 2. How do we know if we're in zone 1?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think you can go and perform expensive laboratory tests and get the printouts, but back to that intuitive type of training, the vast majority of your workouts as an endurance athlete, you want to feel refreshed and energized and very comfortable. And there's no obligation to peg it right at the upper limit of zone 2. And what I've experienced over the years of talking to athletes and working with them, people are frustrated that they are forced to limit their pace to the very top of zone 2 because it's so annoying, because now they have to walk up the hill instead of jog up the hill. So we're so far in excess of what's optimal. Effort to slow down and perhaps dial back a good percentage of the workouts where you're not even worried about your pace. You're not even bringing your heart rate monitor. You're just out for a hike in the forest with your friends. But now the mindset shift is that you can now embrace that this is a fantastic contribution to your peak performance goals, even as a serious runner who can run a 3:30 or a 3:45 or a 4 or a 4:15 or a 4:30 marathon.
Brad, Don and I have been doing a lot of this quote zone one training. We go out, and it's actually, I find a lot of joy in it because we're not pushing it too hard. We're enjoying a good conversation. We're enjoying the outdoors. My concern is because we're walking so much, my body isn't used to running. And so when I go to do a faster paced workout, my body's saying, "Oh, no, 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 we're walkers. We're not runners anymore." How do you balance that in your training?
Yeah, I mean, there's more impact trauma running by far. Walking is maximum one times body weight impact, correct? Because there's one foot always on the ground. That's the definition of walking, or the distinction between walking and running is running has what's called a flight phase in exercise physiology, whereby one foot is in the air. And so the impact trauma running is 3 to 4 times body weight, up to 5 times body weight for Usain Bolt sprinting. But for the average jogger doing a 5 mile run, it's something like 2.3 million pounds of accumulated impact force versus, almost, not measurable walking. And so you're talking about a very difficult and rough and dangerous sport of running, where the modern human is simply not adapted to it. And we talked about the Born to Run, story, and watching the Tarahumara and these people who have run throughout their lives. That's a very difficult athlete to model. It's like modeling the sumo wrestler or the Evel Knievel who rides his motorcycle over the canyon. And boy, I'd like to be an athlete like that. No, you wouldn't, because it's stupid and you could die. So with running, it's something that the vast majority of people might want to reconsider their approach to the sport and realize how difficult and dangerous the sport is in terms of, especially from an injury perspective. And we cite a lot of research in the book. There's a lot of studies on the rate of running overuse injuries. Yale University School of Medicine says that 50% of regular runners are injured every year. Wake Forest says 76%. Some other data shows 33 or 38%. So runners as a group are getting recurring overuse injuries at such a shocking and embarrassing rate that something is truly wrong with the picture. By comparison, the NFL has a 31% annual injury rate with 8% injured at any one time, whereby the running community, 25% of all regular runners are injured at any given time. Worse than the NFL. So what's going on? And what's going on is people who are ill-adapted are pounding, typically with poor form, and generating excess and inappropriately dispersed impact trauma throughout the lower extremities until the weak link goes, whether it's Achilles or plantar fasciitis or knee or hip or lower back.
Wow, it's just a matter of time. It's like somebody walking across a firing range. There's a bunch of targets. Eventually, you're probably going to catch one of those stray bullets coming out. It's just inevitable. And what you're saying is, it doesn't have to be that way to be successful. You can train in some zone ones, because obviously you can do that and still be a world-class athlete. You don't have to be on the edge every time and risking injury as you go out there for a training day.
So here's what's going to happen, Scott. You're going to go out there and walk and have a good time and have the pressure off. And as you continue your commitment to an outdoor, active, adventurous lifestyle and do complementary exercises in the gym and keep your body strong, what's going to happen is that brisk walk is going to feel easier and easier, and you'll be able to go for longer and longer without getting fatigued. And then one day, as you keep at it, you'll be able to break in. You'll be up to that 14 minute per mile, and you'll drop down below 13:57, and you'll be able to jog and keep that heart rate at the same level, whether it's zone 1 or zone 2 or what have you. But your pace increases as you become aerobically fit. And I think probably every listener can relate and nod their head to when they first started and how they got winded running up the hill in their neighborhood. And then pretty soon they were able to jog up the same hill and feel good. So as the aerobic conditioning improves, the body is better adapted to break into a trot. And what a beautiful feeling that is, to actually authentically be able to run even at a slow pace and still maintain an aerobic heart rate.
Yeah, I think there's a number of injuries that are out there that are people that are managing or monitoring or watching closely, and maybe thinking the solution might be a pair of orthotics or a thicker shoe or a thinner shoe or a different pair of shorts or a different colored hat. I mean, they're looking for something to help, get them past this injury, when it might be just slow down and take a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, the injuries are a clear sign of a flawed approach. Mark Sisson says that the injury is your body's way of telling you that you're doing something wrong. It's not more complex than that. And another contributing factor is, excess body weight, where that's coming from overly stressful lifestyle habits and poor dietary choices, poor sleep choices, and all that. So there's a lot you can do off of the course to improve your conditioning as a potential endurance athlete. But the training itself, it's surprisingly, it's an amazing revelation to be able to slow down and realize that you're getting fitter without the usual interruptions caused by poor training decisions. And that's something that the culture imbues in us, is that this is how you're supposed to, push yourself and feel really tired at the end. And then go look at Kipchoge up in the mountains in Africa, running typically 130 miles per week, but the vast majority of it would equate by percentage of max heart rate, let's say, that equates to either a slow or a medium or a brisk walk if you're really fit. But for most people, going at 50% capacity is a simple, casual walk. But again, it's a fantastic training stimulus for your aerobic system. So it's not a waste of time. You're getting in shape and you're a training athlete, even when you go out there for a casual stroll.
Brad, one of the other benefits of walking, I think, and I want some confirmation here, is your body to enhance its proprioceptive abilities, where you're able to feel the ground more rather than just being touching and then doing this flight that you talk about. How does walking help proprioceptive feedback and improve the fascia and the arch and the foot strength and that sort of thing?
Well, what we're really talking about is walking in bare feet or in the most minimalist shoe possible, because unlike running, you don't require this heavily elevated cushioned shoe in order to walk, because the impact trauma is no more than 1 times body weight. So you can immediately grab a pair of paluvas like you guys have and put on the 5-toe shoe and take off walking without this huge risk of injury. That's why, this is Mark Sisson's new company, Paluva, that I'm helping to promote. It's a wonderful 5-toe minimalist shoe. And he says, please don't run in these shoes, but walk in them all day long. Because the running in the minimalist shoe, as we learned from over a decade ago with the launch of the original 5-toe shoe, people got injured left and right because they were trying to honor the amazing Tarahumara and put a little tire tread strap on their foot and go run a marathon. It wasn't going to work for the average person who's had tremendous foot atrophy and dysfunction caused by a lifetime wearing shoes. So with running, you have to have those elevated cushion shoes, because your feet are poorly adapted to run anyway. You need all the help you can get. But when we sort of shift over to a lower impact form of aerobic conditioning, then you can get that proprioception going, where you can actually feel every stride and your posture is correct and your weight transfer and all these things that get thrown off when you're wearing shoes can now come back into focus. And what's really fun for me, I have some videos on the Paluva YouTube channel. Brad Kearns climbing the Cactus to Clouds Trail in Palm Springs, the toughest trail in America. Climbed up Mauna Kea, the volcano, walking on lava rock trails. And every step I took in the minimalist shoe, I could feel the rock going right into my, second metatarsal, but the foot adjusts beautifully when you have that proprioception, that awareness of where you are in space. So even if you were perhaps about to turn an ankle on a sidestep position, your body adjusts where you don't flip your ankle. Have you ever turned your ankle barefoot? No, you turn your ankle on an elevated platform shoe where you didn't notice that root, and all of a sudden the whole system collapses because of poor proprioception. So to regain that proprioception, the idea is to walk around barefoot as much as possible around the home, and whatever safe areas, if you can walk on the beach or something, or put on the most minimalist shoe possible and put some more time in on your feet to regain that lost foot functionality that's come from a lifetime wearing elevated cushion shoes. But again, to finish the point, when you're going to go run 10 miles on pavement or even on a rocky trail or what have you, it's such a difficult ordeal that you're going to have to use protection until you spend a long time perhaps adapting and shifting over to perhaps a zero drop running shoe a few years down the line, or whatever your journey looks like. And a lot of ultra runners have succeeded with that. But it's a very careful transition process that's really most strongly driven by bringing your feet back into the game by being barefoot and walking around a lot in a barefoot type experience.
We've talked a lot about slowing down, taking it easy, don't overstress the body. But and we've heard, I believe, Dr. Maffetone talk about slow down to speed up. So it all fits into that same bucket. But is there a moment, a space, if I want to become the very best that I can become and reach my potential, that I need to reach into that very tough zone 3 and really hammer some speed or attack some vertical? Is there a space for that in trying to become the best that we can?
Oh, sure. Good question, Don. I mean, of course there is. And also the research shows that high intensity workouts deliver a massive boost in fitness that far exceeds a bunch of tootling around at zone 1 heart rates. And that's why over the last 50 years, you can pick up a magazine article in Men's Fitness or Shape or Runner's World or whatever magazine and show that interval training, boosts performance by 38% in 6 weeks. But the missing link here is that you require a very robust aerobic base in order to benefit from high intensity interval anaerobic type training. And so it's sort of like it's a vicious circle because we can't shortcut our way out of this, where we have a tremendous desire to shortcut the process and get super fit and super ripped in a short time. So these workouts of busting out hill repeats or whatever you want to fill in the blank, are going to be very, very effective if you can absorb and benefit from them. And the way to do that is to build up this conditioning base whereby, as I talked about before, you have transitioned from a slow walk to now a medium walk, and then a brisk walk, and then a slow jog, and you're getting fitter and fitter and fitter to the extent that a hard interval session will just be icing on the cake of someone who's already conditioned enough to, for example, jog 10 miles in 90 minutes or something that's, a reasonable level of conditioning. But I kind of shake my head when I see the Tuesday night running group where they're going and doing mile repeats, or you see a post on Instagram where it's like, do a mile repeat in 9 minutes and then rest and do another one and then do another one and then do another one. That's kind of like tuning up a jalopy engine rather than taking the time to build a Ferrari, to where a workout like a mile repeat is probably best done by elite level collegiate runners who are running 80 to 100 miles a week at a slow pace, and then they can go bust out some 5-minute miles and work on leg turnover and things like that. But the triathletes talk about this a lot, where they design their training schedule in 3 sports, and then they have a day dedicated to speed workout. And I'm like, a speed workout for what? You're doing an Ironman in 13 and a half hours. So you're waddling down the 26-mile marathon course in 5.5 or 6 hours. And, there's no such thing as speed. It doesn't exist in your sport. And so I think the greatest return on investment for someone who's anywhere from a 10K to a half marathon to ultra, these are all extreme endurance events that are almost entirely aerobic. So the payoff of doing hill repeats is so small compared to just improving your aerobic base that they probably don't even need to be considered because they have such a great energy cost. The one thing I would consider is to do some truly explosive, powerful, near all-out sprinting or strength training efforts, because that will translate into reduced perceived exertion and improved performance at all lower levels of exercise intensity. So if you can sprint the stadium stairs for 8 seconds and then rest a long time and do it again, rest a minute or two and do another and have a little workout like that takes 10 or 15 minutes, that will measurably improve your ultra endurance performance, because now you're building strong, resilient hip flexors that don't cave in at mile 22 of a 50K because they're just weak, period, because they've never been challenged with anything besides the shuffling workouts that you perform to prepare for 50K.
Brad, this is so good. I mean, there's some more Bradisms inside of this podcast that we're going to have to pull out and start to practice. And if anybody is listening to this says, hey, I want more. Well, there's more in the book, right? Born to Walk. It's right there. There's also more in the BRAD podcast that you publish, and has, great guests and great concepts. And you can hear more of Bradisms and more about how he thinks and views the world with his lifetime of experience from being a competitive elite triathlete in, tops in the world, and then all of his other accomplishments. He's a thought leader and a thinker.
And of course, those links will be in the show notes, Don, including bradkearns.com.
I think we're supposed to do some more. That was a solid wrap, but it just fell flat. It's like boom, nothing else.
I know.
Yes. Good points,
guys.
guys.
I always do these
visit.
I always do these episodes, and I'm making mental notes of how can I be a better runner, and I'm encouraged rather than discouraged. As Donna and I go out, we're not trying to set the world on fire or qualify for UTMB. So we do go out there and we enjoy ourselves and we go at a slower pace. But sometimes I beat myself up and think, this really isn't trail running. I'm not running a whole lot. And I think that you've given me permission to say, that's okay. I am a trail runner, even though I'm walking. And I got to say, I love the Paluvas. They're fun. They're very different than the old Five Fingers. I remember the first time Don and I got a pair of Five Fingers, we were all exuberant. We got them and we went on, I think like a 6 or 7 mile training run where Don just put on those things and thought, hey, I'm going to use these for 6 miles today without breaking in or getting used to them. And he hurt himself. So I like
maybe it should have been 5 miles.
Yeah, you're approaching this in the right way, and I think it's good. I'm barefoot right now, and I'm loving every minute of it.
Hey, Scott, awesome. the reason that just so you know, the reason I'm not running is I put myself right behind you. So there's
I'm slowing you down. I'm a throttle.
I just wanted to say that. Doesn't mean I wanted to lead. That's my excuse.
Hey, Brad, thanks for coming on and helping us understand and giving ourselves permission to train efficiently and correctly so that we don't get hurt, so we can continue to do this for decades and make it part of our lifestyle. So thank you.
Great goal. Love it. Stay out there, have fun, enjoy the nature outdoors, treat your body right. borntowalkbook.com. People can visit and order the book and learn more. And of course, the BRAD podcast. And it's just great connecting with you guys. I'd love to be a regular guest, and we'll hit the topics hard as always.
Yeah, let's do
it. And you can save yourself some money. You only need one club. Don't go buy an expensive set of clubs. Just go buy a 3-wood, buy a good one, and just carry that around. You save money on all those other clubs. You save money on a golf bag. That's the way to do it.
Speed golf is king for sure.
Brad, let's for sure do it again. Some intuition and some strength training, all kinds of things to talk about. And until then, let's just agree to go out and walk.
Mas.